So, yeah, welcome everyone to the third day of the LSESU India Forum 2022, where we'll be hosting this year's media panel. My name is Krishna, and I'm a speaker officer at the LIF this year. I will be your co-moderator for the session. Today, we aim to bring you an insightful discussion about the role media plays in creating India's national image, both at home and across the world. Before we commence, I'd like to thank everyone on the LIF team for putting this together, carrying on the LIF legacy of serving as the UK's largest student-led India-centric conference. And this year, we are proud to provide everyone an avenue to engage with inspiring Indian personalities like yourselves. Speaking of whom, I'd now like to introduce our distinguished panel. First up, we have Ms. Palki Sharma Upadhyay, Executive Editor at WION TV. Ms. Palki Sharma Upadhyay is an award-winning journalist and Executive Editor of India's first and only international news channel. We are all familiar with the flagship Prime TV show Gravitas, where she tracks and analyzes ongoing developments around the world. With the focus largely on international affairs, she has reported from the ground on key events like the ongoing Ukraine crisis, the UN General Assembly, and many more. Next up, Mr. Dhimand Parikh. Mr. Parekh is an angel investor and founder of the Better India, the country's largest media platform dedicated to showcasing positive impact news to drive change. The Better India has democratized news reporting and drives large-scale change on the ground. Next, we have Ms. Ranjana Mangla. Ms. Mangla is Senior Vice President and Head of Ad Revenue at Sony LIF, Sony Pictures Networks India. Her vast experience spanning almost 2 decades in various media networks encompasses of large-scale and media and OTT product launches. Unfortunately, our fourth speaker, Ms. Anubha Bhonsle, founder of Newsworthy and former Executive Editor at CNN-IBN, is unable to join us today due to personal reasons. We do look forward to hosting her in the future. Now it's time to introduce our moderator, Mr. Shishir Bhartia. Mr. Bhartia is an LSE alumnus and head Response Plus Digital and Special Initiatives at the Times Group. He is a chartered accountant and brings forth extensive experience in consumer businesses as an entrepreneur. He's been a mentor and an investor and has evaluated more than 500 businesses at startup growth and maturity stages. Before opening the floor for discussion, I wanted to mention a few housekeeping rules. Since this is an online webinar, connectivity issues may rise, but rest assured, our logistics head will ensure this panel runs smoothly. We aim to have Mr. Bhatia moderate the discussion for about an hour, after which we'll take questions from the audience. The audience can send in questions in the Q&A section at any time, and I will constantly monitor and pick up the most relevant ones. If you have a question targeted towards a certain panelist, please mention the name. Without further ado, I would now like to hand over to Mr. Bhatia.
Thanks, Krishna. A very good afternoon to all who have joined us today from the many prestigious education institutes from across UK and the world. And a very good evening to our audience from India, our panelists. Thanks for joining in today virtually for the LSE India Forum. I'm sure that the next 80 to 90 minutes are going to be very, very interesting, insightful, and enriching for all of us. I will be honest with you, I was only asked to step in yesterday to moderate this panel. At a very short notice, nonetheless, it made me very nervous, and I was super excited at the same time. With such esteemed 4 panelists, of course, today we only have 3 of them, who are all doing some amazing work in their own respective fields. And to share the space with them is a matter of honor. Then to be moderating an LSE India Forum, I take great pride as an alumnus. Myself graduated 22 years back. Coming back to now the topic for the day, there is no dispute in my mind about the massive influence media has in creating a nation's image, both at home and across the world. And it is as true for India. Media certainly is not the only influence in creating the nation's image, but plays a significant role as it presents facts and opinions. Both facts and opinions can have 2 sides or multiple sides, and often presented by different media platforms or brands in starkly different manners or ways. What is presented, how it is presented, could make a huge impact on what image is created. This, in my limited opinion, adds to the responsibility this industry and its stakeholders have. And I'm keen to hear, like all of you, our audience, our esteemed panelists share their thoughts on the same. I'm going to pause here because I know we are here to hear the panelists. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to start with their opening remarks, their opinion on media's influence in creating India's national image. This would include the role of Indian media in Indianization and global spread of Indian soft power. We will have about 6 to 7 minutes time limit for each of the panelists, and then we'll have follow-up questions from myself and the audience. To begin this, I would like to invite Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Over to you, Palki.
Thank you. I don't know what I did to deserve the first chance, but you've thrown me at the deep end, so I'll say what I want to. Hello, everyone. Thank you, London School of Economics, for having me here, and my co-panelists and moderators. Very good to be in conversation with all of you, and I hope that we have an engaging and interesting discussion by the end of it. I would say that the subject you guys have chosen is very significant and very relevant to the times that we are in. It's our times, basically. As we speak, a war is raging on in Ukraine. And it's not just a military war, I would say. It's also an economic war. It's also a narrative war. And the last one, the narrative war, has already been won by Ukraine. Ukrainians have been proclaimed heroes. Their president is being seen as a global superhero. The Russians have overnight been declared villains. And there is a strong case against Vladimir Putin, but it does help the fact that the narrative building machinery, international narrative building machinery, is largely controlled by the West. And that makes a lot of difference. And that is the first point that I want to state. These tools shape the stories that define our times. This is how we will look back at 2022. And we will see Russia as the aggressor. Their lens is the lens through which we see our world today. And I could also say that our world today is basically engaged in a grand storytelling competition. We are all trying to tell our stories. And we've splintered into competing spheres. And all of these spheres are jostling for advantage. And where do you get that advantage? That is where storytelling comes in. That is where the media comes in. And not just the news media, but all kinds of media. And we shape these stories, like I said. And we've learned that it's not possible to mold others, or it's not advisable to mold others through force. So this is the tool of soft power that countries have learned to wield. How do you do that? How do you use the media? We all strive to present our national, our cultural, our personal stories in the most persuasive manner. And then the stories compete. I remember reading somewhere that in the olden times, if you wanted to poison a people, you would poison their well. But as author Ben Okri said, that in today's day and age, if you want to poison a people, you have to poison their stories. Because stories sway us. And they change the course of policies, politics, and indeed our world. I also read a very interesting story. I'll give you an example from the Second World War. America had made a list of the cities in Japan that they wanted to bomb with the atom bomb. And the city of Kyoto was on that list. But the then Secretary of War in America got Kyoto removed and he put Nagasaki instead. Why did he remove Kyoto? Because he'd been to Kyoto on his honeymoon and he'd seen how beautiful it was, how culturally rich it was, what historical value it had. And so he struck Kyoto off that list and put Nagasaki there. So you could say that what worked for Kyoto is its story. Kyoto's story won, and Nagasaki's story was not as compelling. And I think that's a very telling example of what stories can do. And that is why it's very important to be in control of your story. If I speak about India, we are a country of 1.4 billion people. I was looking at some data. I really like telling everything through numbers, so I will share some with you. We have more than 1,500 channels in India, the fourth largest number in the world. We have more than 390 news channels. We have thousands of newspapers. India is the second largest print market in the world. We have a very aware and engaged audience, both on television and in print. And yet, until recently, we did not have a single news channel or newspaper that was really telling India's story to the world. If the New York Times writes something about India, We may trash it, but we are consuming it nonetheless. We are being affected by it. And we are creating our self-image through the words of the New York Times. If The Economist weighs in on an Indian election, it immediately becomes news and it lends to the political debate. Tell me one Indian newspaper that talks about what's happening in an American election or a French election or a British election, and that becomes part of the conversation domestically in those markets. It doesn't happen. And that is the soft power that the Western media enjoys, and it lends to their home countries. If there is disturbance in Kashmir, until recently, the world was learning about it through the BBC or Al Jazeera. And they would see it through their lens, their own editorial biases. And that's not something I want to dwell on at the moment. The very simple point I'm making is that why couldn't India, the land of epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana, tell its own story in its own words? That was a huge gap. 75 years almost is what we've waited for this. We're trying to change that bit by bit. And I'm happy to say that I'm part of one such effort. WION is India's first and only international news channel. We're trying to work towards it, but we know that we have a long way to go. So that is the first point that I want to dwell on today, to be in control of your story, to actively shape it. The second point I want to talk about is building trust. Telling stories is not enough. Are people consuming your story, and in what form? Do they believe what you tell them? By all accounts, the consumer of news, not just in India, but everywhere in the world, does not believe anymore or does not have faith anymore in the deliverer of news. And we have lots of factors to blame for this. You could blame social media for it, but it would be wise to also introspect. The mainstream media has to look within and ask itself, why is it that viewers do not want to watch us anymore? I remember a few years back an editor very interestingly saying that my competition at 9 o'clock today is not other news. My competition is Kapil Sharma and Big Boss. So why is this very aware audience not coming to you to watch the story of Chernobyl and going to Netflix? That is the kind of questions that news media has to ask itself. In the last 2 decades, we've seen an explosion of content. There are multiple channels, heavyweight anchors, same graphics, same visuals, same guests. So what we're basically doing is, and also the same decibel levels. It reminds me of the song, I'm just a copy of a copy of a copy. And people don't want to watch copies, they want originals. And so they're moving away from news. We kept looking at each other and we perhaps forgot the viewer. If someone else was doing something, then I will do the same, brighter, bigger, bolder, but not necessarily better most of the times. And at some point you have to ask yourself, do people really want to watch it? If they really wanted to watch a stunt, would they watch Avengers or Anchors? And those are questions that we have to ask ourselves to not become a circus. Social media came and then punctured our bubble. And it made information dissemination a two-way street. Until then, we were the ones deciding this is a headline, this handshake is a headline, and this handshake is not. This is what makes it to the front page, and this should be relegated to the sports page. But social media told us that a sports story can be front page and the full front page, because that's what people want to consume. And it's a very, very tricky balance to have, because sometimes, and we are not just another product, we're not making fans or soap, with all due respect to the manufacturers of those things. Our product is also ethical. So we have to look at what the consumer wants. At the same time, we also have to look at what is right. And are we being able to strike that balance? When we do that, we will find an audience. We will find the numbers that all of us are chasing. We all have targets. So basically, we've seen a major disruption in the news market. And I would say that this is a good disruption. We are still in a state of flux. We are still trying to find our space. And this positive disruption makes all of us, not just the creators of news, but also the consumers of news, stakeholders in our collective story, because they're also shaping the story as much as I am. The burden is not just on me anymore as a journalist. But as a journalist, I do not have the luxury of getting my facts wrong. And I will have to work to build that credibility, to make my audience believe in what I'm saying. And keeping in mind your 6-minute thing, I just want to wrap with one little thing for the students who are listening to me. Being in control of your story does not just apply to nations and societies, it also applies to individuals. So think of the story that you want to tell your children, grandchildren, friends a few decades from now. What do you want to be? Will your story be more exciting than your CV? If you want your story to be more exciting than your CV, you have to start working on it now and start writing it now. All the very best.
Thanks, Palki. That was very, very a wonderful start rather to the session. What I take away from the first few minutes is the narrative war. And that was a very interesting term that you used and you spoke of. You spoke about poison the stories versus poison the well, which was what we used to be there earlier. You spoke about to be in the control of your stories. I'm just picking some key words that I'm going to share from here on, and I'm sure the audience is going to make a note and share these thoughts that you have shared with us today. Lastly, you also did mention that we do all have targets, and yes, it does come somewhere in the larger picture of what we do at a media house and as media professionals and as media stakeholders. But we also got to be trusted and to be believed in. So there are contradictions, there are different ends, there are complexities that many of our Indian platforms, media platforms balance very well. And we will hear more of it. I have many more questions on this. But before that, I'm going to request Dhimant to step in to share his opening remarks. And then, of course, we'll have Ranjana follow after that. So Dhimant, over to you now.
Okay, that was quite insightful. I'm a bit of a contrarian over here. I don't come from a media background. I switched off television 20 years ago. We haven't had television in our home for 20 years. I think we recently started our newspaper subscription because we wanted the crosswords back at home. So it's been we came in and kind of the whole thing started really at one point where we started thinking about how can media really bring about and catalyze impact on the ground. We kind of also believe that controlling or shaping the narrative should not be a media prerogative. It should not be anybody's prerogative. It should be that we are basically channels of information and people should consume what they want and interpret what they want. But having said that, we realized that the morning news, and this was back then, right? So about 10 years ago, the morning news was more important than the evening news. So when we would get up and kind of read the morning news, and we would realize that there's absolutely nothing that it's doing to me from making a difference in around myself or in myself and so on. So we said, we really started asking the question, could news bring about a change, right? And how do you do that, right? And when we started going a little deeper into this, we realized that traditional media has done a fantastic job of talking about what's broken, right? And I think it's very important because you need to know what's broken in order to go fix it, right? So it's a very sort of a nice top-down approach where traditional media is talking about things that are broken with the hope that it goes to the authorities, there is a change in authority, and with that, there is a change that will trickle down to the citizens. So that's a great sort of an approach that media has been using. But at the same time, we realize that there is this urgent need for a bottom-up approach of change, where could you give access to information? Could you give access to inspiration? And could you give access to common citizens with knowledge that they can use to make make things better for themselves despite the authority, right? For too long, I think the spectrum of content that has been available to the common citizen has largely been on that side of, what's broken. Either you have a lot of that, or you have a lot of celebrity stuff, which is, in the entertainment realm. But really, nobody was throwing a spotlight on what's working in the country. And I think that's a significant gap that existed all along until we kind of came in. And we said, let's change this, right? Why can't we give a spotlight on a guy who's, a rural innovator who's done fantastic work, which has transformed the lives of farmers in his neighborhood? Why doesn't that person get the spotlight that that he's deserving of? And how could we kind of change that? And that's really what led to the Better India. It started as a side project. We would just go around on weekends, me and my wife, writing about people making a difference in and around Bangalore. And I distinctly remember this one thing, which was the pivotal moment for us. We wrote a story about a photography club, which was run by visually impaired people. So you can imagine, these are completely blind people who are running a photography club. And we thought that's like a fantastic thing. And we put the story up. And 2 weeks later, a young girl kind of gets in touch with us through a friend. And she tells us that, she was visually impaired, and all her life she wanted to pursue photography, but, everybody would ridicule it. And even she thought it wasn't even possible. But the moment we kind of put this up, it was completely transformational for her life. And then she went ahead and joined this club and all of that. The reason why I kind of narrate this is that is when we realized that if you could be transforming a person's life with a story which was read by probably just less than a few hundred people, imagine what you could do when you kind of scale this up, right? That was the day we both kind of quit our jobs. And we said, we need to kind of scale this. Since then, we've covered hundreds of thousands of stories of change makers across the country, people making a difference. But it's been just so fascinating to see the impact of just leading with the solutions lens rather than a problem lens, right? So with the solutions lens, we've managed to kind of bring water and sanitation in villages. We've galvanized people to come together to rescue farmers from poverty. We've helped hundreds of urban slum schools get funded. We've rescued areas from drought. A completely citizen-led, democratized way of creating impact, but all of this through storytelling, right? So I think where we've kind of tried to play a role is really kind of balance that spectrum of content, right? Where a citizen is, of course, going to read all of the stuff, right? There are people who are interested in business, in soccer, in politics, and at the same time, we want people to kind of get aware around things like sustainability, around innovations happening in rural India, and so on. I also personally kind of think that it's extremely important for media to not only leave people with questions, but also to lead with a path towards a solution. Here's the thing, right? If you're going to bombard people constantly with negative, despairing kind of stuff, eventually what happens is people become numb, right? Like if I'm going to just keep talking about about everything that's wrong, at some point you're just going to become numb to it, and it's no longer sensitive to you, right? What that does is people start opting out of conversations, right? And hence that's terrible for a democracy, right? On the other hand, if you start leading with solutions, of course we all acknowledge there's a problem, but if you talk about the solutions, it's amazing to see how many people come forward and start really participating in making that change, or scaling up those solutions that we're talking about, and so on. So yeah, I think to summarize, what we've really kind of focused on is using the power of storytelling to get today we reach out to 300 million people every month across our social media channels. Now, and how do you get 1 billion people to be inspired every day to make a difference, to kind of really improve things around themselves, and collectively, how do we not only see the better India, but how do we also build a better India, right? That's really kind of the area that we've been working on. And it's just been super phenomenal for me personally, coming from a non-media background, to see the power of storytelling and the kind of change it really brings about. So yeah, really excited about it.
Thanks, Dhimant. I am going to come back to you with a lot more questions. You've made us more curious to know a lot more about Better India. I'm speaking more from an audience point of view. I, of course, am already a big fan of what you guys do. I've been reading and following a lot of your stories. But before I come back to us, let me first go to Ranjana, and then I'll come back to you and Palki for more questions. So Ranjana, over to you.
Thank you, Shishir. So first of all, I want to personally congratulate Palki. I know she mentioned that we never had a version of our own when it comes to news to take it to the world. And I think Palki and WION together have really done a fabulous job at it. I know so many people who consume the content, and I think there is a more neutral narrative and our version of story to the world. So huge congratulations to you, Palki, on that. So I want to really thank you guys for this opportunity to be on this panel amongst such bright and really young minds from London School of Economics. It's truly an honor. Speaking of Indian media and our culture, I was just thinking about it. It has been so attractive to the global audience for ages. I mean, even if we look back at time, people have always been very, very interested in our narrative. But like Palki said, we didn't have our version of story to be told in this new world. But that is what has happened with digital leading the way. The distribution barriers of content have completely vanished. So there is really no control on how we want to tell a story to the world by the Western world or any other part of the world. Why sort of blame it on just West alone? So this new world has empowered Indian media, or let me just say Indians in general, to take their stories to the world, and definitely on a very strong path of Indianization. I was just thinking about it. What is really Indianization? How are we really doing it? I think it's through the stories. Whether what Dhimant was talking about or what Palki was talking about, I think at the heart of it, it is the story. As Indians, we have the vision and mission, I think, for a better world. Indians are leading the corporate world as well, globally. So if one must call it the soft power, then yeah, that's also really, really happening, in its own way. And I think we are well on its path. As Sony LIV, we are present in multiple countries today, in multiple languages. Audiences can watch it at their own pace. They can watch us in multiple languages at the time of their choice, at the choice of their screen. And that's really the power of this new world, which is empowering for storytellers. One of our blockbusters, Scam 1992, became the highest rated shows on IMDb with a rating of 9.6. Could that have really happened in the good old world? Probably not. It's actually the power of the new digital world. As media, we present, in fact, Palki spoke about it briefly about, how we are as a country with, our sole endeavor is to usually put out every story that we put out is to connect with the people. In a country of 1.4 billion people with nearly 20,000 dialects and officially 22 languages, critical news to a section of India could be really noise to another. And that's the world really we live in. India is extremely complex from media consumption point of view. Approximately 700 million people today are probably not watching even a second of television. They are below 25. Their content consumption patterns are very, very different. They are not watching content the way we've watched it traditionally on a large screen. They are watching it on the go, on a device of their choice. That changes everything. Environment changes, and therefore their choice of content changes. So ultimately, viewers' choice, in my mind, really dictates the content that we put out. That is the genuine truth of today's media to a very large extent. We go out sharing our narrative from our version to the world in our own individual identity. And it's upon people to view it or conclude it in their own way. That's really where we are today, in my opinion. Over to you, Shishir.
Thanks, Ranjana. I hear you speak about the distribution barriers reducing. I hear you speak about soft power, Indians leading in many spheres globally, the power of digital world, the noise in media, and the many millions of people in India who yet don't consume much content. And a huge opportunity to, of course, reach out to all the mediums that we all have collectively in this country and beyond. As we go to the next set of questions, I'm just going to remind our audience that we are open to your questions. We've started getting some of these questions already, but I know all of you have been engrossed in hearing our speakers. So now's the time, take a quick 10 seconds, pen down your thoughts, put your question up, do tell us who you want us to ask that question. Do share your name and the city you currently reside in so that we can take it up in the last session, the last 30 minutes that we have today.
You know, Shishir, I just wanted to make a point. Of the 700 million people who I spoke about, they do consume content. It's just that they consume it very, very differently, and they don't consume content. And, you know, that's really the power of, what has happened to WION. I'm going to take that. And that's a very classic example. I think just the distribution of it and its power to really go via various channels and just share the narrative has led to that story being told. In the traditional world of television, I can tell you, distribution played such a big role in where your channel is placed and how your channel is placed and who is the most powerful anchor, that really led the way. So even if you had something really powerful to say, distribution really, to some extent, and I'm sure Palki would agree with me, having that experience, did stop it. But that doesn't happen anymore. If you have something powerful to say, it will be out there for people to watch in various screens.
Right. Thank you. And thank you for the kind words. I'm going to intervene here. And I hope between Ranjana and me, we can convince Dhimant to get a TV after 20 years. The crossword point was well put. I should share this with you. An ENY study said that the New York Times did a research on why are people coming back to the newspaper. And they found two verticals that are doing very well: food and crossword. Wow. But that's not what shapes the New York Times. So while food and crossword are great, we have to do news. The second thing you said about, making a difference to lives, all media should strive to do that. But at some point, we have to decide, are we journalists or activists? And this is a debate that is as long as the press. You would remember that 1993 iconic photo, Pulitzer Prize winning photo of a starving child in a famine in Sudan with a vulture in the same frame. Yeah. And the photographer, should he have fed the child or captured the moment? And he decided to capture the moment. And I think that is the basic instinct of every journalist. I want to tell the story first and then be a part of it.
Indeed, indeed. So Palki, you took away my point on Dhimant. Certainly, we all thoughts on what would make Dhimant pick up all the medias that we create, provide, and distribute. Okay, quickly coming to my second question, and let me tell you, I have a great number of questions. So we're going to take like quick 2 minutes for each of these questions now. And the next question is again for all three panelists. Please share with us about what impact you and/or your organization has created in the very recent time, something as recent as last week, yesterday, or last month, on our nation's image. And which particular story are you most proud or fond of from the impact prism? Not from any other prism, because you could be fond of, depending on many different prisms, but from the impact prism. And again, okay, this time let me go to Dhimant first, and then we'll come back to Ranjana and Palki. So Dhimant, this question's for you first.
Thanks, guys. It's a great question and an easy one for me because we're just doing impact day in and day out, and that's really what we measure our editorial on. So tons and tons of stories. One of my most favorite stories is, and this really kind of stirs things up internally, even when I think about it. Every time I think about it, is, this is way back in 2016. These are early stages of of WhatsApp, right? People are just starting to kind of use this and stuff. And in early 2016, one of our correspondents comes across a group of 3 to 4 farmers in the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra. I mean, we all know there's lots of challenges there for the farming community and all of that, right? But there's this group of 3 to 4 farmers who were using WhatsApp as a means to counsel each other, right? And kind of sharing information and helping each other out, right? Back then, this was a very novelty thing that farmers are using, a group of farmers are using WhatsApp because in the early days. So we wrote a story about it, that this is an interesting way in which farmers are collaborating, helping each other. And the idea was that, others would kind of pick it up. that story kind of went viral across social media, and eventually you had the local sort of the district authority there who got the story, and he actually organized 1,200 farmers from that entire district to come together. He put up a screen and had the story translated in Marathi, and he read out as to how collaborating and just having access to each other was helping out these farmers. And overnight, 1,200 farmers started, creating these groups. It was one group, and then it became like, there were some 20 odd groups. And suddenly all of them had access to information. They were able to counsel each other, and it completely transformed that community there, right? And to me, the incredible thing was that this was a story published in English, online, distributed on Facebook and Twitter. But the impact was on 1,200 farmers in a remote region in Vidarbha. That story still remains like, one of my favorites in terms of the impact that we had, where we kind of published it here, and you see the impact happening, and all of that happened in a flash of 2 weeks. So yeah, that would really kind of be one of my favorite stories.
Thanks, Dhimant, for sharing that. Over to you, Ranjana.
Last, I think 14-15 months have been so overwhelming, just telling stories almost every day, I think, of what we want to say. The recent one that really comes to my mind, and we can talk about Rocket Boys, but before that is definitely Shark Tank India. I manage sales, right, for ad sales for Sony LIF, and pretty much I've done that all my career in entertainment and various business units where I've worked. You want to create a show like Shark Tank India, there are no takers because it's not a rating churner. It needs a lot of courage for us to go out there and take that kind of creative risk and say it's all right. I think the timing is right. We need to be there, out there, giving people a platform to come and present themselves. And I think it's about time that entrepreneurs are celebrated in this country. That whole landscape has to go above and beyond IITs and IIMs and the top B school folks, right? A Kamlesh Jugadu or a revamped Moto has to come to life. And for that to happen, there has to be, like Palki said, we all have targets. But when you go with a show like that, you don't necessarily define it by a target. When we went out there to create that show, we knew very much that it could land up to be a big failure. We may necessarily know that advertisers won't lap it up because it's a rating game at the end of the day. Or in my world, it's the reach game and uniqueness. So I think going above and beyond all of that and to still go and create a show like that has been my favorite part of this new world, where you know that the whole economics of traditional media and digital media coming together can make something like that possible. Because just looking at it from a traditional media standpoint, probably it won't be possible. We attracted all kinds of audiences. I have personal stories of so many people telling me that they have sat down and watched it with their 80-year-old children. And I don't know how 80-year-old children are really able to understand a startup and how to create a product and profit and margins and all of that. And they find it entertaining as well. We clearly are in a new world. Or to tell a story like Rocket Boys, which can essentially be so boring. It's the story of, and we know this because we are from TV world, stories that have mostly been about a space scientist haven't really been very exciting for Indian television from the rating standpoint. People want soap and drama. And in that world, to go out there and still tell a story, which is so important and relevant in these times of everybody wanting to land on space, is I think phenomenal. So yeah, those are my two favorite stories, at least of the last 14-15 months, where we've just gone and created what we truly believed in and the stories we wanted to tell.
Before I come back to Palki on the same question, Ranjana, do you want to tell us any impact that you have seen or spoken of from the global world or from across the world on these two particular series that you spoke of, Shark Tank and Rocket Boys? How are people globally taking it, and what's the impact or on the nation's image?
See, when you create a show like Shark Tank India, definitely our first priority is genuinely the Indian market. I think we want to really take it to our Indian audience first. As far as the global audience is concerned, I think image making and the right kind of image building is so important. I think it just gives landscape to people to do more. We got, for the first season, we had nearly 60,000 entries. Now that's a lot of number of people wanting to be entrepreneurs in the first place and putting themselves out there, willing to take feedback, willing to go through the whole scrutiny. And kudos to the sharks, the guys who really came out and really they were really they're truly themselves. I mean, I was amazed when I went on the set for the first time and I saw these guys shooting. My first response was, I said, they're actors. How are they so comfortable in front of camera? I said, and because they were just being themselves. So I think the two parts of this, right, which is to say that if you have an idea in India as a marketplace, there is money to be invested and there are ample amount of ideas. Come to the country, and invest. I think both parts just worked very, very wonderfully for the show and definitely for us as a platform. Rocket Boys is good old, beautiful way of telling a story. We're still taking it to the world. Show is just about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We've had an excellent response. IMDb ratings have been fantastic. The show is still on its journey of getting the kind of success it should really see.
Thanks, Ranjana. And now to Palki. Palki, you break stories 24/7. Your stories impact all of us. If it's not at your 9 p.m. show, I watch the 11 p.m. If it's not that, it's the reruns, or it's the next day on social media, but we catch it anyways, right? So I'm sure you have like a dozen or more stories from yesterday that you would want to tell us that created impact. But pick your favorite one.
Thank you so much. You've all been so kind. But yeah, I think, like I said, we are in this age of positive disruption, and it doesn't matter what story you tell. What matters is how you tell it. And I say it to my team all the time, there is this concept of katha and kathakar. So you would have seen children go to their grandparents and they ask for the same story to be told over and over again. They know the story from the beginning to end, but they want it told because they're coming there not for the katha, which is the story, but the kathakar, which is the storyteller. So you have to be a storyteller who's answering all the questions that your audience may want to hear. We are in an age also of bold experiments. Last week, we did a 9-minute video on why Russia wants Ukraine. And some in our team thought that it was too, we delved into history. We started with the 9th century and then went on to talking about what's happening now. It has got 2 crore views, 20 million views on YouTube alone. So if you tell a story well and at the right time, it works. A few months back, we did something called the Great Resignation on why people are quitting their jobs in such large numbers. And we discussed the trend, we discussed the reasons as to why people were leaving, and we also offered some solutions on how to retain talent in this day and age when the younger workforce is looking for different things. They don't want to tie themselves down by buying a car or a house. They want, they believe in the gig economy. They want quick rewards and so on and so forth. And I think it made an impact because it made not just the younger members of my team and other teams introspect and figure out, okay, this is what is happening with us and this is how companies can make it better. I have lost count of how many people in HR have sent that story back to me, and some have applauded it and some have said that you've made my life difficult because now everyone's coming to me and saying, look, the attrition rates are so high. We did, I would say, a fantastic coverage of the pandemic, and the impact was that we were banned in China. We could not even do live hits out of Beijing, and we wear it as a feather in our cap. So stories can be told very nicely. If you give me one more minute, I will introduce you to a concept that changed my life and my approach to storytelling. It is called the concept of orbit shifting. And it says that we are all, we all know gravity. Gravity is something that grounds us. It's also something that makes sure we don't fly. And we all have these gravitational pulls on many, many levels. There is personal gravity, where we tell ourselves, this is what I can do, this is what I cannot do. There is company gravity, where you're always told, this will not happen in this company, don't even try. There is industry gravity, where you're told at 9 o'clock, you have to have guests, otherwise your show will not work. You need some talking heads. And then there is a societal gravity. In India, we call it Jugaad. So we grapple with the cumulative gravity of all of these forces. And how do you achieve an orbit shift in your storytelling in the way you present content? You have to shift the orbit. And if you shift the orbit like a Shark Tank did, or like Dhimant did with, coming up with solutions, you can make any story very compelling.
Thanks, Palki, for those insightful comments you've shared with us. Over to you, Dhimant, for the next question. We all understand that the Better India is amongst world's largest, if not the largest, positive and solutions-based, content-driven impact platform. However, as they say, you cannot please everybody all the time with whatever you do, however positive it may be. So do share with us what some of your critiques have to say on the concept of positive and happy stories.
I think one of the unfair advantages we've ended up having is that the internet troll army largely leaves us alone. Because where's the angle, right? If a farmer has done something innovative and is innovated, like where do you sort of come in and troll? So I think at some point we might be a little bit of frustration for the internet, trolls to kind of come in. Having said that, there has been, I've kind of had conversations in, quote unquote traditional media circles, right? That isn't the role of media to highlight the issues that plague our society, because that's really the fundamental sort of purpose. And what you're trying to do isn't that contrary to what media is supposed to do. And our kind of answer to that has been that, look, I mean, we don't even look at it from a definition of what media is kind of defined as. What we're trying to really do is use the power of stories to bring about change. And by virtue of that, because our sort of vehicle to bring change is stories, we tend to fall under the media bracket, sure. But I think that definition needs to be expanded, saying that, and especially in today's world, right, you have such niche content on so many different topics, right? Where you can no longer be that media is defined by that the purpose of media is purely to this, like what Palki is doing, for instance, right? It's bringing an explainer concept to the news, not just kind of reporting news, right? And that's a very different dimension, and that expands the whole definition of media. So yeah, we've had that sort of critique. That the other big critique, of course, is that are you looking at the world through rose-tinted glasses? And is this about just saying that everything is great? To that, our answer and our stand has been always very clear, that there are enough and more publications who are talking and doing a much better job of talking about the problems and issues and all of that, and we completely say that that's so critical, right? What we're trying to say is that we're completing the spectrum for a common citizen, right? It's like asking a cricket-focused site saying that why don't you talk about soccer? The idea is that, look, there are enough and more people who do a better job of that, but we want to kind of increase the the options of content that's available to people. So someone who reads us is obviously also reading your conventional newspaper, is also maybe reading The Economist, or reading any other magazine, watching other news channels, all of that, and we're trying to kind of complete that. So yeah, that critique has been kind of answered from a point of view that, hey, we're one of the slivers of the entire media spectrum that is accessible to a citizen.
Thanks, Dhimant, for answering that question. I'm going to take my next question to Ranjana. Ranjana, you spoke about Scam 1992. You spoke about Shark Tank. One of the other shows I also watched was Maharani. And of course, Rocket Boys, my absolute favorite of the recent last few weeks. Have had this discussion with many friends and families and colleagues, and I think everybody loved this. We've all been saying, why didn't we have these shows when we were growing up? Why didn't we study through these kind of shows, specifically Rocket Boys, to tell us the scientific strength back then? Because the kind of stories, the kind of memories we have from our history books are very, very different, and not of the positive soft power, scientific power of India in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and so on. You did speak about the challenges such content or shows have from a revenue angle.
Yeah.
What made you still take up this genre, and what can we expect? If you can give us a sneak preview of what's coming in the next few weeks, months, or the year of this kind, so that we can all lap up more content of this kind.
A lot of content decision in these days apparently is taken through an algorithm. And I think as Sony Pictures India, I can clearly tell you, we are not taking our decisions via algorithm. We do seriously believe that there is ample space for us to now, in this world, tell a story for a section of people who we feel, when we put it out, will watch it because of the impact of the story that there is purely. And then when it multiplies and more people like you or maybe Dhimand and everybody else ends up watching it, then it becomes a critical success. But are we chasing only that? Not really. We are right now a platform that gives people an opportunity to come in and present their story. We are working across multiple languages, multiple producers, content creators, and just going out there and creating a lot of stuff that we really believe in. Rocket Boys is one such thing. Maharani is still, I would say, is a little more massy, right? Because it's still, in a political arena, you have a popular face and, all of that. You usually sort of, they get you better tune-ins, and there is sort of early access and appointment viewing, and all of that will happen. But outside of this as well, I mean, all the content that we put out, whether it's Andekhi or, JL50, and I don't know if some of those stories you've seen, but they're equally exciting. And the next year as well, we are making almost close to 75 originals in multiple languages. So our ambition is to just be out there and just enjoy right now, at least for the next 12 to 24 months, this world where we can, tell stories. So I think, yeah. And of course, we'll have all our reality shows back as they've always been. Sony, overall, if you see, we really believe in all kinds of talent that India has. Whether you have knowledge, there is KBC. I think the one thing that we were missing was Shark Tank India. Now we have that as well. We are really looking for more genres of content that we can really tap into and probably, and see how we can bring it, to television or digital for people to really watch it. I think that's really our endeavor. And I think, the success of Shark Tank India has just given us more wings to go out there and do. In fact, the first 10 days of response of Shark Tank India was quite mixed. We were getting all kind of mixed reviews from people. It's only towards the third week onwards where everyone just kind of really understood the show and said, okay, even on evolved platforms like LinkedIn, we had mixed reviews about the show. And from third week onwards, I think everyone just understood how we wanted to go about it. It wasn't necessarily a show which was meant for Shark Tank global audience. A lot of people in India are major followers of Shark Tank Global, and they thought we were creating an English show, which will look like an English show. But that's not what we really wanted to create. We wanted a Kamlesh Jugadu on our show to be able to really come out there and just say it as he likes it, That's really the endeavor. So yeah, a lot of it is lots of stuff in the pipeline. We'll keep sharing.
Thanks, Ranjana. No, the point I want to make here is, while we do speak about, good stories, news, print media, everything else, which is very, very important, content of these kinds create a huge impact on society, at least within India. Like you said, the focus is there currently. Yeah. And that impact is sizable and requires far more content from all media platforms, globally and nationally that are targeting Indian audiences. And what better than Indianized content or Indian stories, which are narrated through the Indian perspective. Like Palki said, the Indian story, the right way through the Indian lens or the Indian perspective is important. You also mentioned about Mahabharata and Ramayana and epics of that kind, Palki. So I'm moving to you for the next question. Slightly, more on the global arena and impact, because that's where, I believe on the panel, you are, your show and the platform is playing a very, very big role. What do you think, beyond what you are doing at WION and Gravitas, should be done by Indian news media to establish global status or reach or impact across Indian diaspora and beyond with the Indian stories?
Okay, interesting. What should we do to reach that global standard? I would turn the question around and say that we have a bigger audience in India than in other countries. So why shouldn't we be the global standard? That is question number one. And the kind of stories we put out and the kind of engagement that we see from viewers. At the end of the day, we're all targeting our specific audience. And if the Indian audience wants to watch an Indianized Shark Tank, then that's what they will get. Similarly, if an Indian audience wants an election trail across Uttar Pradesh with reporters stopping on the road and speaking to some neta and just showing all the hustle and bustle of an election, and if that's what the viewer wants to consume as news, then so be it. So this is what the Indian media is doing. Why aren't they doing it differently? Because our market is different, and our sources of revenue are also different. In India, news subscription is a very small market. If you look at the, and you all know the business, but if you look at the pie, news is one sliver of, GEC is so much bigger. And in that one sliver, we have a negligible portion of subscription-based revenue. So you're chasing advertisers, and advertisers are looking at ratings, and ratings come when you do, in Hindi channels, there's a word which is very popular, you must have heard it, chakallas. So people do chakallas, and that's what they become. And people did chakallas for years in Bollywood, and it became an international brand. So, whatever works for them. I'm not going to be sitting here and commenting on what those channels are doing. Yes, some of them can be a little more mindful of facts and not exaggerate things beyond a point. But yes, I personally firmly believe that you don't have to raise your voice if your argument is strong. And you can hold the viewer's interest and attention if you're putting your point well. And we've seen that, not just the Indian diaspora, we've got a lot of support from them. But if I look at my weekly viewership ratings, viewership patterns, and only 40% of my viewers on a platform like YouTube are from India. The remaining 60% are from other parts of the world, and they're not all Indians. They are, when we covered what happened in Canada with the Justin Trudeau, the truckers protest, the kind of response we saw from the average Canadian to the opinion makers to the politicians was immense. When we covered stories related to China, very interestingly, the third highest viewership consistently for us has come from the Philippines. Because we do China-centric stories and Philippines gets affected. And so we are becoming the voice for the people of Philippines, not just for the people of India. We have seen a lot of engagement from countries like Taiwan and recently Lithuania, which is also standing up to China. So it doesn't matter, your geography does not matter. Sometimes I get inputs on a potential story I could do from as far away as Mauritius. So I'm saying that people in all of these remote parts are consuming our content. They believe in what we are saying and how we are saying it. And they want to be part of our storytelling and they want to engage with us. And that is a huge boost for us. So you have to choose, as any platform, TV, news, newspaper, you have to choose your path and your TG. And once you do that, you have to stick to that path. And I agree with Ranjana when she says that sometimes it sounds like an idea that will not work. Like when WION began, we are not a state-funded. Most international channels are state-funded. And distribution, while a lot of things have opened now, distribution still remains a very expensive proposition. You know, when you go via satellite to a Middle East, or we are on Sky in the UK, and I know doesn't come cheap. So when you're putting in that kind of money, what are you getting in return? And how much can you say that I believe in India's story and I want to tell this? And, you know, at the end of the day, it's a business. So at what point do you decide that this business is not getting me the kind of revenue, and how will I sustain it? You try and tell it better, and you try and get the engagement from the local audience. And I think 5 years down the line, we have been able to achieve a lot of it. So short answer to your question, to each his own or her own. And this is the path that we have decided for ourselves. And we believe that we can make an impact with the kind of stories we are telling.
Okay, that's an interesting answer, Palki. A follow-up question for you. You spoke about business and the India story and the complexities there. Let me simplify and at the same time make it more complex, the next question. Keep the business aside. Let's say you are in charge for India's image, the India story, the nation's image at home and overseas. And let's focus on overseas for this question. What do you think should be done? Where do you think is the huge opportunity to kind of cover up, to add in, to amplify our approach, our reach, our storytelling? And what kind of impacts would you like to see, or measure for this role, if there was one like this?
I think I'm already a small cog in that bigger wheel, I hope. But I would take a leaf out of Dhimant's book and say that I would tell it as it is and tell the positives, because the world has for very long focused on the negatives. India is not a monolith, neither is Indian society. We have some very bad sides to our story, and we have some fabulous things that we've done as a country and as a people. But every time I show India, I don't have to show, we call it the B-roll, the footage that we show. It doesn't always have to be from a juggi. It can be from golf links also, because that too is part of India. It can be from some posh localities in Bangalore or Mumbai as well. So to see India through only one lens has been one of the failings of the international press. And as somebody who, as you've said, I'm representing India for the world, I would try to show India in all its colors. And it's very hard, honestly, for a Western audience to truly comprehend the diversity of India and the many complexities that form what is India. And we need to educate them, because what happens is that we are also, like I said in my opening remarks, constructing our self-image through their eyes, right? If an Indian child gets selected for a NASA program, it's a front page headline. But if an Indian child gets selected for an ISRO program, he or she makes it to the school notice board or the parents' WhatsApp group, right? I could ask this to all the audience here. How many people can name the space agencies of Russia and China? They've done great things, but the average person on the street perhaps cannot even give you the full form. That is the power, the soft power of what is American. And how do we enhance our soft power? By telling the things that we have done right. Yes, we have wrongs and we accept that, but so does the United States of America. There's a higher chance of an American today being shot dead by a teenager than a terrorist. And that is a fact. But that does not take away the fact that America has also created the biggest tech companies in the world. And these two facts coexist. Similarly, there are facts that coexist in the Indian story, and we need to show the other side. And that is what I would like to do.
I'm sure there are many of us listening to your comments, Palki, your suggestions, and I'm sure this is going to go to many more people beyond today's live audience. And certainly the points you've made should be noted and acted upon by yourself and all of us and the country and the nation collectively. We have many questions coming in from the audience, and I am running late with beginning those. So I'm going to keep next 15 to 20 minutes on asking questions from the audience. Dhimant, first question is for you from Kalrav Joshi, an MSc Media student. He asks, and I'm just going to quote him, about the dilemma between media putting spotlight on people, contrasting with spotlight on problems society face.
Yeah, this is similar to what I spoke earlier, right? Of the point about saying that I think both need to be done. That's really kind of what I believe. Like we need to have media which focuses on the issues that society is facing, so that those can be addressed. And at the same time, with equal importance, I think that we need media that focuses on solutions and what's working, so that even that can be amplified and replicated, right? But to expect one media company to do justice to both these aspects, I think is kind of asking for too much. I think people can, media companies specialize on things that they, go into deeper and stuff. So yeah, I think we've taken on this role that we want to bring to society. Someone just quoted this to me, and I thought it was interesting that we're basically building an archive of the nation's goodness, and that's an interesting archive to have as a solutions platform. So today you can actually go to the Better India, and if you want to learn water conservation, you have hundreds of articles. You want to know how to build a completely sustainable home, living off the grid. We have tons of videos around it. If you want to know how to kind of grow veggies in your balcony, we have tons of articles from it and all of that. So our mandate and our aim is basically to document and archive solutions spanning across categories, women empowerment, education, animal rights, all of that stuff. And yes, there is also an equal need, like I said, to focus on the issues, but then there are enough other publications who do that, and there's no point us kind of replicating that.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. This is for Palki. Is Indian media doing enough to highlight marginalized voices of our people?
It's never enough, I would say. If they're still marginalized, it's not enough. The idea should be to bring them to the mainstream, and we can do more. And that includes all of us. But news also has a cycle. I mean, suddenly Ukraine has pushed everything out of the newspapers and TV screens. That doesn't mean all of those things are not happening. They're happening, but something else has taken precedence. And that unfortunately is the nature of the beast. The big headline takes over. But the idea should be to not lose sight of what you want to do in the long run. I can give you our own example. Climate change is a footnote at every global conference. Everyone talks about it. It's a nice thing to dwell on and then forget. I think we're the only channel that runs 2 daily broadcasts on climate change every day. It does not get sponsors very often unless someone's trying to do CSR. But it's something that we believe in. Now, we cannot espouse all causes, but we feel that this is something that we should stay with. So I think every channel, every newspaper, every media house has to pick the things that it really believes in and stands for and keep pushing, because these bigger changes do not happen overnight, including bringing marginalized people into the mainstream. It's not going to happen overnight. And the way our world functions, there'll always be a section that is marginalized. But yes, I would say that we all could do more in that respect.
Thank you, Palki.
And I'm going to say that I will have to leave quickly because I have a show to do, another 5 minutes maybe.
Certainly. We completely aware of that. one quick question for you, and then we'll move back to our other panelists, Palki, before you leave. There are some very promising growth stories emerging, such as rapidly expanding entrepreneurial culture, successful startups, green energy, adoption in India, growth of prestigious Indian education institutes, their infrastructure, increasing appetite for domestic capital, and so on and on and on. I can go on. What, in your opinion, are the stories or themes, the broader themes, not daily ones, but sort of which could go on for a quarter or a year for 2022 that you would like to focus on?
Entrepreneurship certainly is very important again. I think it's important to map all of these things because these stories, the list that you mentioned, is what is shaping the new India. And the new India cannot be disconnected with the old India, like I said in my previous answer, that there will always be issues that need resolved. But you also have to look at the glass half full, and all of that you mentioned is the making of that glass half full. The transition to green energy, we are still in our nascent stages, but we can do more. It's about creating awareness. People know these subjects, but are they ready to put their money in it? Do they believe that it's happening tomorrow or 5 years down the line? So startups is something that we ourselves at WION, we are planning to create a series or a program around it because we want to highlight those stories. We do have a show called The $1 Billion Idea, but I'm sure we can do more to tell because it gives hope and it gives courage, I think, to a lot of young people who want to chart their own course. We need to become a country of not just coding coolies, but we need to have our own Google and Apple. And this is one step in that direction. I think we can give that push and that encouragement by showcasing those stories. So yes, I think there should be space for positive stuff, although it does not sell from a business perspective, I can tell you. Nothing sells like war, and that's unfortunate. But that's the world we live in. We try to find our balance. So we show the war that's going on, but we also show the human stories. I can tell you about yesterday. I had 50,000 odd people watching my show live on one platform. And towards the end, when I came to the story of the human suffering in Ukraine and how a child is separated from his parents and how a girl was crying, the numbers dropped to 17,000. That doesn't mean I'll not show it, but I'm just saying that this is the market, and it's a very competitive market. So I started with the Mahabharata. I'll end with it. The Mahabharata has told you how to navigate a lot of paradoxes, and we can look for answers there as well, including winning the narrative. You know, the Pandavas were not above blame. They gambled their wife away, but they won the narrative, and they said that we are fighting for dharma, and so everyone was on their side. So I'm not saying be the Pandavas, but control your story and try to find what you think is your dharma and what you think is the right balance for you.
Thank you, Palki, for spending the last 75 minutes with us. We'll continue. Stay with us as long as you can, but thanks once again for joining in.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Okay. You know, we've been talking about business, Ranjana, and business positive stories and war, right? That's what Palki kind of ended on as one of her comments. I'm going to come to you and Dhimand, both of you, but Ranjana first. Wearing the revenue hat, wearing the sales hat in a media organization, what could be done or what is being done to create the India image or the India story? You know, there is a content side, there is a storytelling side, but while you wear the you wear the revenue hat. How do you play a role, and what could many others like yourself? We have far too many of you and my kinds, which are in the business of media and the sales of business media. What could we do? Share some thoughts and opinions and advice.
So, you know, as content creators, every time we want to do something disruptive, something which is not being tried and tested, the first response, like Palki said, right, it doesn't sell, right? the first response of most of the popular advertisers is to say either the economics doesn't work or they don't believe in the idea itself. And it happens very, very often. I think the one big job that we can do as leading media revenue for any publisher is to take that particular piece of content to the right kind of brand. And the moment you make the two marry, the economics starts working. There are today ample number of brands who want to create an impact through purpose. And I think that is the central code. Every time you want to say something new, I'll tell you a small example. We were creating Rocket Boys, the show was done, and we were just launching it. And we were looking for a premium review partner. And there is this brand called Atomberg Fans, not the most popular brand. Very few of us might have heard it because it's only a digital only brand. But at the heart of it, they want to tell a story of saying why a fan should be a certain way and why it can't be different and how much innovation they are doing in terms of technology. And they found associative value in it. Versus if I had taken that particular show to a popular fan brand, they would have looked at it just from the lens of saying, how many effective viewers am I going to get? Is it going to work on my economics? And all of that. So I feel the one big responsibility that all of us have, and that's around the world, not just for India, as revenue generators for publishing houses to work, is to, every time there's a interesting piece of content or there is a right piece of content, take it to the right kind of brands. And that's when it really starts working. I think that's my core of it. And that's what I've always believed in. If you look at the kind of sponsors who we had around Shark Tank India, and none of them came on board after Shark Tank India was already released. We actually locked most of them almost 6 months ahead of the release because the show was completely canned before it went live. We went to the right kind of brands. I didn't really go after a Unilever or a P&G or a Coke and a Pepsi, telling that narrative to them, because I know they are going to look at the success story of season 1 and then probably come for season 2. We went after the newer brands who we knew would immediately lap it up because they've gone through that journey themselves, right? So they're the first time believers because they have that journey. So somebody like a Varun from Acco would instantly believe in it because he's seen it. He has built Acco from ground up. So when you take something like Shark Tank India to them, they'll instantly say, yes, we want to take it. Let's go ahead and support it. So, that's the world I think we need to create more. It needs a certain amount of hard work because it's not easy to get that kind of access with a lot of people who are usually extremely busy. These decisions are more entrepreneur led, is in my experience. Most of the times the CMOs are, in a certain box. Very few are really genuinely wanting to walk out of that box because ultimately it's all about effective media buying, right? And therefore you have media agencies, etc., etc. But to think outside of that, yes, it takes a certain amount of hard work on all sides. But I think our job is to just find that right brand.
Ranjana, you spoke about getting to the right brands, and that reminds me of what I read, Dhimant, you saying this long back, that, first, for your first revenue or advertiser on board, or among your first few, you travel several times to Mumbai to meet a leading telecom brand agency or media personnel or media buyers. Tell us what it takes today to go on making creating or publishing great content, and how easy or difficult it is still to create this impact that you are doing for the last many years, and the commerce support for it.
Yeah, from my early stint of when we started media, and then we are trying to monetize it, and we signed up a company which came in and did branded content as it's known, right, in the media space. I think that was the time I realized that this is the most inefficient way to make money, because it's such a long cycle and so many people involved. You have advertising agencies involved, you have clients involved, and every time you're starting from scratch, right? Every new campaign you're starting from scratch. So it really doesn't bring in any efficiencies. So that was the time when we realized that the only way to grow is to have multiple revenue streams. And while Palki did mention that negative content sells and stuff, it's been interesting for us that we've been profitable since 2016. It's been over 6 years of growing revenues year on year and being profitable at that. And that has happened purely because of our multiple revenue streams. So while we do branded content, and that is a decent chunk of our revenues, one of the things, for instance, what we did 2 years ago, we launched an e-commerce brand, which is called The Better Home, which was a complete direct-to-consumer FMCG product, 100% biodegradable, sustainable home care range. Right? It fit in with the ethos of sustainability for this thing, and our community really took to it. It scaled significantly, and that brand got acquired, and that acquisition recapitalized the Better India. Right? So we're constantly kind of exploring, we take a different lens. We look at the community and we see that what are the tangential parallel businesses that we can build on top of it, in addition to media. Because I fundamentally think like the media business models are not the most efficient ones if you want to really achieve scale. So e-commerce has helped us significantly, to scale up revenues. We do branded content. We also syndicate some of our content. We also do impact consultancy. So we work with large corporates to conceptualize, develop, and execute impact programs because we have that expertise now, working in the impact space. I think if you're in the media space, I think you have to always keep an eye out on building multiple revenue streams. Just putting it out on one is going to be extremely hard to scale.
We are running out of time, and I'm just going to get one more question to you, Dhimant. You spoke about impact consultancy. I had a question for Palki earlier, and I'm going to put you on spot with the same question. If you were to be providing your consultancy services, your opinion, your suggestions, your guidance to create the nation's brand globally, what comes first to your mind? What should be done, and how?
Do I go first?
Yes, Dhimant, for you.
Okay. I think for me, I think it's very, very important that we throw a spotlight on the common citizen who is trying to, make things better for herself and for things around them. I don't think that's been done enough. There are millions and millions of people out there who truly making a difference in their own little way. There are so many grassroots innovations that are coming out of India which are not getting the spotlight. So if I were to kind of do this, I think I would love to throw a spotlight on India's innovation machine, which runs deeply through the country. And most people don't even know about it. There's a person who's developed a braking system for a bullock cart in rural Karnataka. It hugely helps the farmers there. There's a cancer specialist who actually developed a voice prosthesis device for people who have throat cancer. The alternatives, until he came in, the alternatives were like upwards of thousands of dollars, and he's developed it for 50 rupees, and we don't have a spotlight on him. There's a packaging company in Tamil Nadu which has made completely biodegradable food packaging containers, which will completely replace all the packaging that we kind of use. There's not enough spotlight on it. And all of these are innovations with global impact, right? And global potential. So I would totally go into the innovation space and bring out and unearth and throw the spotlight on all these grassroots innovations.
Okay, thank you. We have, and I'm going to take this one last question now before we wrap up. This actually is coming for Palki, but I'm going to still throw it open to both of you. Whoever, you can choose to take it up, Ranjana or Dhimant. It's a very interesting question, and I don't want to miss this. How do you, or if I were to broaden it, how does a media personnel manage personal bias towards one's nation when presenting facts or arguments that might negatively influence the viewer's image of the nation?
I think Dhimant is more better placed to respond to that, because I think in his capacity, he's been doing a lot. So I'm pretty sure he'll be able to put some better spotlight on that question.
Sure. Look, let's face it. We all live with biases, and in every action we do, we take, everything, biases do creep in. The only thing that you can really do, and what you should really strive to do, is bring in systems and processes in place that can eliminate or at least reduce. I wouldn't even say eliminate, but that can reduce your biases. One of the things we've done here at the Better India is that our entire editorial is a completely independent editorial board. So, you know, as founders, for instance, there isn't an influence that we could kind of have and come in. There is a whole checks and balances kind of a checklist that's kind of got created. There's a very clear definition of what's a story and what's not a story. And the entire thing is kind of managed by a completely independent editorial board who doesn't have any reporting to you know, to the people outside. Having said that, of course, you know, there would still be biases coming in from the people who run this, right? Because it's such a gray area. And I'll kind of tell you a very classic example is what is development for someone could be sort of degradation for someone else, and where do you kind of draw that line, right? So you have to constantly kind of rethink and reimagine a larger picture and say, is this, you know, falling under our purview or not? So it's a great question. I don't think you can ever eliminate biases, but you have to try and kind of reduce as much as possible.
Thanks, Dhimant. I did choose to skip my closing remarks for getting this question out and your answers in. So thanks, Ranjana and Dhimant. Of course, we would have loved to have Anubha, who couldn't make it for personal emergencies. And thanks, Palki, for joining us earlier. Would once again thank the LSE India Forum for inviting us, for inviting me for this session. I believe this is a week-long India Forum, and would love to catch up on more sessions over the next few days. Thanks, Akash, Hasti, Krishna, and the entire team for organizing and supporting us in this for the session, which went off flawlessly, as I would like to believe. Signing off, wishing all good health and success, and certainly look forward to staying in touch with everyone, the panelists, the forum, and the entire team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you, Shishir. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey guys, all the best. Thank you.
Over to you,
Bye-bye.
Krishna.
Can we leave, Shishir? Or
Oh yeah, just once again wanted to, from the forum
All right.
side, wanted to thank you guys, and yeah, certainly many takeaways from all three speakers. Yeah, and thank you for an enriching discussion.